Who should trade for Ben Simmons? Let's get into this.
Dosage. Oh yeah, I work with the medics. I'm about to get you injected. I got a couple connections so I can get you prosthetics.
Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoy this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. After years and years of trying to work out both Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid together on the Sixers, I think at this point it's pretty clear that the Ben Simmons experiment just did not work out in Philly. And after wrong decisions, in my opinion, on both sides, both the Sixers and Ben Simmons, the situation that they're in currently is basically the Sixers have to trade Ben. Ben made it clear that he doesn't want to play for the Sixers anymore, and basically the only solution to this Ben Simmons problem that the Sixers have at this point is just to trade him. And probably the worst part about this situation for the Sixers specifically is the value that Ben Simmons has currently is by far the lowest it's ever been throughout his whole career. Of course, there's a bunch of different reasons on why Ben's value is so low currently compared to the rest of his career, but of course the main issue was just his performance in the playoffs last season. He completely disappeared, showed a complete lack of confidence on that one specific play that I think we all know, where Ben had a wide open layup or dunk and decided to pass out of it, and eventually the Sixers ended up losing that series to the Hawks, and overall Ben just had a terrible playoffs in total. But even besides that, the way Ben has been acting early on in this season has definitely lowered his trade value. But of course the biggest issue with Ben that he's been dealing with throughout his whole NBA career was his three-point jump shot, but I think we all already knew that. But the real issue with Ben is there's a ton of players in the NBA that can't necessarily shoot threes that effectively, but if they're open they take those three-point shots, especially if they're at the position that Ben is. But the issue with Ben is not only is he a terrible three-point shooter, but he's so scared to shoot that shot that he just doesn't shoot it at all, which is a much bigger issue than just shooting a poor percentage from three in my opinion. What that really tells me is there's certainly something going on in Ben Simmons' head. So all those reasons that I just listed out is the reason why Ben's value currently is the lowest it's ever been. And luckily for the Sixers, there was a report that came out recently saying that the Knicks, Lakers, Timberwolves, Trailblazers, Kings, Pacers, and Cavaliers are among teams interested in Ben Simmons. Now, it doesn't mean that all the teams that I just listed are all legitimate contenders in order to try to trade for Ben and there's going to be an all-out bidding war for him. The answer to that is certainly no. There's a bunch of teams that I just listed off in that report that in my opinion absolutely make no sense and should not have interest in trading for Ben. But sometimes what happens with these reports that come out is some teams may say they have interest even if they have no real interest whatsoever, and it makes no real sense whatsoever to add a guy like Ben to the roster, but they just put their name in the hat, and that's the reason some of these teams got listed, even though it makes no logical sense. But before we go into which teams actually make sense for Ben Simmons and where he should actually get traded to, let's actually look at what Ben Simmons does well both offensively and defensively and see where the real value is. So in terms of Ben Simmons' actual scoring ability, what he does well offensively is driving all the way to the basket. Of course, Ben has a really good build at that 6'10 size, as well as he is very athletic, so when he gets a full head of steam driving all the way to the basket, more likely than not he's going to have the ability to posterize whatever defenders in the paint. But even besides posterizing whatever defenders there, he also does a great job at finishing around the basket with crafty layups. But besides just driving and finishing around the basket, another thing that Ben does well, which is unique for his position, is posting up around the basket and putting up those hook shots either with his left or right hand as well, which is pretty effective for him. Ben also has an okay mid-range jump shot, a little bit of a pull-up mid-range jump shot he's decently effective with, but of course we all know he can't shoot threes whatsoever at this point. But besides just his individual scoring, something that Ben does very effectively is pass and play make. Ben, in my opinion, is certainly one of the better passers and playmakers we have in the league. He does a fantastic job at just getting everyone calm and really running the offensive effectively. He's always going to find that wide open guy either in the corner for a wide open three at the top of the key, cutting all the way to the basket for an easy layup or dunk or whatever. Ben just does a fantastic job at running the offense overall, and he's one of the better passers and playmakers in the league in my opinion. But what makes Ben so versatile in my opinion is not only is he pretty good offensively, but he's also an elite defender. Defensively, he's always going to guard the opposing team's best player each and every night, and he's going to do probably as good of a job as you possibly could on them. But besides just his great individual defense, Ben also has a knack of getting steals either by poking it out of whatever player he's defending, or also does a great job at getting in the passing lanes and getting those poke steals like that as well, and quickly taking it to the other end of the court and dunking it or passing it to one of his teammates for an easy layup or dunk. Overall, although Ben certainly has some issues and flaws with his game, in my opinion, I think he's certainly a very valuable player at this point in his young career. So that's really the value that a lot of teams see with Ben Simmons. Maybe the Lakers could eventually get a deal done where they trade Russell Westbrook or somebody else like that in return for Ben Simmons going forward, but in my opinion, I don't think it changes that much for the Lakers. I think Ben and Russell have a very similar game in the sense that they both really can't shoot threes. But in my opinion, where do I think Ben should go? I think out of those teams that I listed, it should really be down to 3 teams that make the most sense. Number 1 is the New York Knicks, number 2 is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and number 3 is the Indiana Pacers. But let's start with the New York Knicks. Why do they make sense? So it's been pretty clear that early on in this season, the Knicks have certainly been struggling. And it's also been pretty clear that the Knicks' biggest issue, in my opinion, is their lack of a point guard. On any good NBA team, you always need that point guard on your team to really calm everyone down and run the offensive effectively. So when you talk about a guy like Ben Simmons, of course he does have some issues, but overall what you could say about Ben is he's a fantastic passer and playmaker. So adding a guy like him to the offense, in my opinion, would just make this Knicks offense run a lot more effective. But also another thing that the Knicks are struggling with this season is their defense, specifically from that point guard position. And that's the main reason why the Knicks removed Kemba Walker from the lineup completely. He just was not doing it defensively whatsoever. So bringing in a guy like Ben Simmons, who I mentioned before in the video, is not only a good defender, but he's an elite defender. Bringing in a guy like that to this Knicks roster is not only going to help them a lot offensively, as I mentioned, but it's also going to help them out defensively pretty significantly as well. Ben, as I mentioned before in the video, is always going to have the ability and will guard the opposing team's best player each and every night and do a great job at it as well. And that's something that the Knicks truly lack at this point, just a complete lockdown defender. So adding Ben to their defense, in my opinion, would fix a lot of issues they have defensively. Now, of course, it's not a complete perfect fit. One issue I will say is the Knicks probably would have to trade Julius Randle if they wanted to bring in Ben Simmons. I don't think those two necessarily would work out that effectively. Maybe I'm wrong, and if it were to happen and the Knicks don't trade Julius, hopefully I'm wrong. But I see Julius having the ball in his hands a lot, obviously currently for the Knicks, and Ben obviously made it pretty clear in Philly that he doesn't do a great job at playing without the ball because he can't shoot whatsoever, obviously, and can't space the floor, so he just kind of clogs up the paint. So that's the reason why I don't think those two specifically would work out, and I think the Knicks would need to trade Julius in order for this to happen, or should at least. Well, another issue is Ben obviously was not able to handle Philly that well, so if he wasn't able to handle Philly, how is he actually going to handle New York? That certainly is a question that would remain to be seen, and could be another issue I could see if he does go to the Knicks. And also another thing is I don't necessarily know if the Knicks would actually trade Julius Randle this season. I think they're probably going to hold him for the rest of this year, and maybe if he continuously plays bad this year, then maybe next year they would trade him. But I think they're kind of set on holding Julius at the very least for this year. But if the Knicks were somehow able to get Ben Simmons on their team, I think overall it would be a pretty good fit for them, and certainly address a lot of needs that they currently have. But now let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. Why do they make sense? So over the past few seasons, the Cavaliers have certainly built themselves a pretty nice young core in Cleveland. And the reason why Ben Simmons, in my opinion, would be a pretty good fit in Cleveland is, of course, first of all, Cleveland's a smaller market, so there wouldn't be as much pressure on Ben Simmons' shoulders, and certainly I think that would help him out pretty significantly, just working behind the scenes. But also I think adding a guy like Ben to this young core that they have currently, in a very talented young core, I think they could certainly be one of the more exciting up-and-coming teams in the NBA, and could potentially push the rebuild forward maybe about 2 or 3 seasons by adding a guy in Ben. Because don't forget, at one point in time, Ben was certainly an all-star type player, and even potentially a superstar type player. So the hope would be for Cleveland, if they were to trade for Ben, would be he could potentially regain that same confidence that he had at one point in time when he was drafted or a few years in. And also when you talk about some of the other players they have in the team, and Evan Mobley, and a guy like Darius Garland, Larry Markkinen, and some of the other nice players they have on their team, adding all those guys around a guy like Ben, I think could be a very lethal team going forward. Now, if the Cavaliers were going to trade for Ben Simmons, they would definitely, at the very least, probably need to trade a guy in Colin Sexton if the Sixers want him. But in my opinion, I think that would definitely be a very good scenario for them, because I also don't think that Colin Sexton and Ben Simmons necessarily would work out together either. And I think a guy in Darius Garland would definitely work a lot better with Ben Simmons because he could shoot way better, and also has shown the ability to play off ball a little bit more than Colin. But now let's talk about the Indiana Pacers. Why do they make sense? So the reason why I think the Pacers would be a pretty good fit for Ben is very similar to the reason for the Cavs. So there's been a report that came out recently that the Indiana Pacers are looking to completely blow everything up and start from the beginning. There's been reports that they're looking to trade Sabonis, they're looking to trade Miles Turner, they're basically looking to trade all the stars they have currently and just completely start over. And I think if the Pacers were to bring in a guy in Ben Simmons and completely build around him, I think it could potentially be very good for them going forward. So obviously Ben Simmons plays very similarly to Giannis. Of course Giannis is much better than Ben, especially at this point in his career, but they have a very similar skill set. And I also think the blueprint has already been laid out for how to build around a guy like that. Just put all shooters around him. We saw how successful Giannis was with it in Milwaukee, especially after winning an NBA championship. And I think, for example, if Ben Simmons was traded to the Pacers, he would be the main guy that they're focusing on and completely build around Ben Simmons and just make life a lot more easy for him by adding a bunch of shooters and defenders around him. And overall, I just think Ben could certainly thrive for the Pacers if they completely build around him. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Which team do you guys think Ben Simmons should get traded to? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.
Dosage. Oh yeah, I work with the medics. I'm about to get you injected. I got a couple connections so I can get you prosthetics. Hope you can't go where I'm headed.